أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. Continuing with our discussion where we were exploring and we were discussing those areas which require further research. We have discussed a few topics. Today we discuss another area which I believe personally that requires further attention and further research on that topic. And that is the issue of walking to Ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This has become the norm today, which was never the norm for just 150 years ago. That was never the norm. But today it's become a norm, which we will briefly discuss the history of walking. But before that, I would like to clarify this on the onset that, see, I am not against walking. Those who want to walk, it's their prerogative. They can walk. They can walk from their home. They can walk from wherever they want to walk from, especially when the fatwas and the opinion of the scholars is that it's mustahab to walk. What I'm interested in is more of an academic discussion and an investigation. A proper research should be done, again, which I keep on repeating, that which fulfills the academic standards, so that we can get convinced that walking is mustahab. Now, as I go further, you will notice why I feel that there's a need for further research in this area. Now, before we get into the discussion we want to have today, a very brief history, because there is nothing out there as a history. When did this walking start? So when you look at scholars, when they talk about walking, now you see, unfortunately, it's become an emotions are running beautiful for those who have emotions and all whatnot in its place. But when it comes to academic discussions, emotions should be kept aside. Now, sensitivities and emotions get involved even in academic discussions. So they will come and tell you that walking was very prevalent during the time of the Imams towards the Ziyarah. You ask them, where are the examples? They don't provide any examples. Similar to the issue of what we discussed in the previous discussion, we were saying, did the Imams go for Ziyarah? They'll come and tell you, every Imam went. Where did they go? When did they go? No examples. So for example, when you come to the whole issue of walking, they will come and give you very strange examples. So for example, Hussein, the son of the daughter of Abu Hamza Somali, went to walk. Who is Hussein? If Abu Hamza himself went, it's another issue. He's a recognized companion of the Imam. We don't know who is this Hussein, the son of the daughter of Abu Hamza. So this is what they will provide during the time of the Imams. There's nothing as such out there. The Imams themselves, as we mentioned, they didn't go for Ziyarah of Imam Hussein. Thus, there's nothing of walking out there. So leave after the time of the Imams again. Then you go in the government and the caliphate of the Buyids, the Ali Buya. So this was a Shi'i Zaydi caliphate from the 4th, 5th century. So there's an example. Ibn Jawzi, he's a Sunni scholar. He quotes in his Al-Muntazam that Jalal ad-Dawla, one of the kings apparently, in 431 Hijrah, he goes walking from Kufa to Najaf. This is one example. Now, a king's example in Hujjah for us, I don't know. And then again, a gap altogether till the Safavid period. Can you see this? 431 till 900 to 1000 Hijri. So almost 6 centuries, there's nothing as evidence that what did the scholars do? Did they go for walk? Did they not go for walk? Was this a prevalent practice? Nothing is available out there. You come to the time of the Safavids again. Some of the Safavid kings would go to Mashhad, not for Ziyarah of Imam Hussein. They would go for Mashhad walking. This is another example we have. After that, again, we have a gap altogether. Shows you this has not been a prevalent practice. So on one side we have the theory which tells you it's mustahab, and then on the other side we don't see any kind of practice being done on this issue. Until the time of Sheikh Ansari, okay? So Sheikh Ansari passes away in 1281, so he's in 13th century Hijrah. Okay, so you see the gap years. There's nothing in between to tell us what was happening. He is the one now who starts going to go to the Ziyarah of Imam Rida alayhi salam in Mashhad, not in Karbala. Okay, he's going to Mashhad. The example we have for Karbala is in the 14th century, so very recent, 120 years ago. Marhum Akhund Khurasani, okay, Sahib Kifaya is the author of Kifaya, the famous book of Usul al-Fiqh. He goes walking to Karbala. Okay, now this is what we have, and the final example we have is from the example of Muhaddith Nuri. So the book Najm al-Thaqib, okay, which is a book of Muhaddith Nuri itself. In the introduction of this book, on page number 25, you can read this, that after Sheikh Ansari, okay, after Sheikh Ansari in 1281, there was a period now where walking was considered to be only for the people who are poor. Again, can you see this? The difference between practice and theory, okay? So notice what he says. بعد از در گذشت مرحوم انصاری زمانی فرا رسید که پیاده روی نشانه از فقر بود. So only those who are poor used to go for ziyarah while walking, okay? So walking was a sign of poverty. So where did all these riwayats go then? What was happening? These are all areas which require research, okay? So after Marhum Muhaddith Nuri now, okay, who was the teacher of Sheikh Abbas Qummi, he started reviving this 120 years ago. Slowly now the whole practice of walking started becoming normal, and then you start having mawkibs and all whatnot. So this practice of walking to Ziyarah of Imam Hussein is 120 years old, nothing further than that, okay? And that is why I'm saying there's a need for further research in this area. Do you get me? So those who want to go for walk, it's their prerogative, they can go to the walk, but academic discussions are needed, researches are needed to be able to get to a proper academic conclusion on this topic. That was point number one. Point number two, which I want to make, is I hope you will bear with me today. The discussion is going to be a very hadith-based discussion. It's an interesting discussion, though the example and the sample case which we're discussing is a very small issue. But all what I want to impress upon you is this, that when you go through these ahadith, which we will mention, they are contradictory narrations, and how scholars try and reconcile between these narrations. You should learn these methodologies, because every area which you go into the hadith corpus, you will find contradictory narrations. And thus you should learn these methodologies of how to resolve and reconcile between narrations. That's what we are trying to show in today's discussion, okay? Now, before we get into the discussion, I would like to give a very brief overview of today's discussion, and then we get to the actual hadith and the examples we want to give. So, discussion number one we want to have is this, and this is something which I really want to stress, and I'm arguing for this, that scholars have understood these riwayats literally. What I'm asking is, can these riwayats be understood literally? So the riwayats, I mean by riwayats of walking, okay? So we have plenty of riwayats, plenty. If you open the books of hadith, you just search man masha, okay? The one who walks for I don't know this, walks for this, walks for that, for different things. As I'll mention the example. For so many things we have the riwayats that if you walk. Now, should we be understanding these riwayats literally, or should we be understanding these riwayats collectively? What I'm arguing for is that these riwayats need to be studied collectively, and then you come to a conclusion. Okay? Not read one riwayah in one chapter without looking at other riwayats. Okay? And then what you end up getting is the spirit of the law and not the wordings, which are the focus should not be the wordings, rather the spirit and the lesson to be learned from the wordings. Okay, so to give you an example, come to the Quran itself. When you come and discuss the whole issue of walking, okay, look at how the Quran discusses. So the mushrikeen had issue with the Holy Prophet being and the messengers being humans, yeah. They wanted non-humans to be prophets, yeah. And that is why they would say, "Mali hadha Rasul." Okay, what is the problem with this prophet, this apostle of God? يأكل الطعام ويمشي في الأسواق. Now notice the word used is يمشي في الأسواق. Okay, he's eating and is walking in the market. Now, if you go ask that mushrik in Mecca, do you intend to say that he's walking, literally walking, or no? The message he wanted to give, and the message the mushrikeen wanted to give is that we don't want to accept this messenger and apostle of God who is a human. Okay, so the spirit of the verse is not focusing on the wordings, rather it's focusing on the message that Allah sent a human being as a prophet and not a non-human being as a prophet, the way the mushrikeen wanted. Okay, I hope you're getting what I'm trying to show. Or for example, Surah Bani Israel, this is one of the hardest verses. If this verse is talking to the Holy Prophet, who is the most humblest of all on the earth, then what happens to me and you? Okay, وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ maraha, O Prophet, don't walk on the earth exultantly, arrogantly. Now, does Allah intend to focus on the word tamshi, meaning you have to walk to be able to show the pride and arrogance? Or no, the spirit and the lesson of the verse is that don't be arrogant, don't be exultant. Okay, this is the spirit of the verse itself. You don't focus on the word walk. Rather, the message is, if you are in a bus, if you are in a car, if you are in a plane, wherever you are, don't act arrogantly. That's all. Okay? Hope this is what I'm trying to. So when we come to the riwayats of walking also, I'm calling for this kind of understanding. Okay? This is one point. The second point, which is related to the first point, and I hope I could explain this. I'm sorry, today I'll take a bit of time with this lecture today. Are these riwayats, okay, indicating tariqiyya, or they're indicating mawdu'iyya? Okay, so these are strange words, but they're not hard to understand. So these are discussions scholars have in usul al-fiqh and after that in fiqh. There are two words being used, tariqiyya and usuliyya and mawdu'iyya, sorry. Tariqiyya, so you know that the Arabs would say tariq. Okay, tariq is for a rod or a pathway. What's the use of a rod or a pathway? A pathway or a rod takes you from place A to place B. That's the whole purpose of a rod. You don't go sit on the rod. The rod is used to take you from point A to point B. That means it's a means. And that's exactly what they mean in usul also. Tariqiyya means, when you read a hadith, some hadith are tariqiyya, meaning they're a means for another goal altogether. Those wordings are not the goal. The way I said, وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. The purpose is not to emphasize on the walking. Rather, the purpose is to be able to tell you, don't be proud and arrogant and exultant. Okay? So tamshi is just a means to take you to the goal. Okay? Or these riwayats are indicating mawdu'iyya, meaning they are the purpose and the goal. Do you get me? Okay? So majority of the scholars are understanding it as mawdu'iyya, but I'm advocating that there's a need for research for tariqiyya. Why? When I come to the riwayats, I will mention why I mean that. Okay, so let me explain this whole tariqiyya and mawdu'iyya a bit better so that you can understand with examples. These are fiqhi examples. I'm not going into the details. Okay, I'm just giving examples. So you notice in the classical times, okay, science hadn't come, there was no modern technology, so advancement was not there. When a crime takes place, okay, the only way to establish that that crime took place was two means. Okay, there are two ways of establishing that this crime took place. One is if the person who has committed the crime, he himself confesses that he has committed the crime, number one. And method number two was testimony of witnesses. Okay, now depending on the crime, the amount of witnesses, again, that's a whole fiqh discussion which needs to be had some other time. Okay, so these were the only two ways of establishing if a crime took place. Now, if you believe that this is mawdu'iyya, meaning this is the goal and the purpose, so that means you have two purposes. One is that these methodologies are the only methodologies and nothing further than that. And the other purpose is to establish if the crime took place. I hope I'm explaining, okay? But if you take it as tariqiyya, okay, that means it's a means to take you to, so the purpose is to establish the crime if it took place. One of the means is confession and testimony. There can be other means also. So today we have medical examinations, we have DNA testing, we have digital recording, we have CCTV cameras. These were all not there at that time. Do you get me? Okay. Now, if you confine it to mawdu'iyya, that means you can only use those two means, nothing more. But if you say it's a tariqiyya, that means it's a means. The purpose is to establish the crime and not the means. Okay, the means is just to take you to the actual goal. Let me give you a better example so you can understand better. The whole issue of moon sighting. Okay, today there's a whole discussion within scholars, and especially youths in the West do ask this a lot also. When we stay outside, we see these differences within the families, questions do come up. Yeah, so you have a group of scholars who believe that the hadith of sum lirru'ya, so that you see the moon and then you fast, and when you see the moon you break your fast. Okay, so these group of scholars who believe that this hadith has mawdu'iyya in it, the sighting has mawdu'iyya in it, meaning what? You have to see with naked eyes. So sighting with naked eyes is also the purpose. So you have to sight the moon, and naked eyes is also one of the goals. It's not a means to establish the moon. So this group of scholars then will not allow you to see the moon with any other means. But there's another group of scholars who come and tell you, no, the purpose is to see the moon and establish whether the moon is there or not. You use any means. You use the naked eyes, you use the telescope, or now you use even scientific methods. Okay, so they will tell you in the fatwas that if you're really certain and you feel certain that the word of the scientific scholars are established, then you can accept it also. Okay, this is the direction of tariqiyya. I hope you're getting me, okay? So let me give you another final example, a modern example. I'm raising this question because this issue needs to be discussed. I'm sorry we are running away from these discussions, but we who are staying outside the Islamic countries, we need to have these discussions for our children's sake. Our children, you see what's happening today is if you speak to those people who are researching on the topic of taqleed and marja'iyya and ijtihad, they will tell you that when you go on the ground, the situation is very different from what we are theorizing in our institutes, okay? We feel that our children are following a marja and all whatnot. In theory, yes. But when it comes to practicality, there's a very big divide between theory and practice. So there's a person I was talking to who has done his research and PhD on the topic of taqleed. He was telling me this, that when you go speak to people, you realize that when it comes to their daily activities, they are far away from following the marja. Okay? Practically, they're disconnected from the whole issue of taqleed. And one of the reasons is because we are not discussing this conflict between modernization and traditionalism. Okay? And this is where the whole issue and discussion comes between progressive researchers and scholars and traditionalist scholars. Okay? So to give you an example, in the Quran also, we have it in the Quran, leave alone hadith also, we have it in the Quran. Now, I'm not giving my opinion, I'm just telling you that this is a discussion where we need frank discussions on these issues, okay? So one of the discussions they will discuss is the penalties discussed in the Quran, okay? The punishments and the penalties which are to be given. So, for example, the cutting of the hands and I don't know, killing and all whatnot. Are they tariqiyya, okay? Or they have mawdu'iyya? Meaning, are they a means to reach to establishing the crime and rectifying the crime? So the purpose is not to punish in this particular way. The purpose is to be able to identify the crime took place and punish and rectify that person. Or no, the punishments itself is a goal itself. So if a thief comes in today, should I cut off his hands or not? Okay? This is a discussion between progressive scholars and traditionalist scholars, where progressive scholars will tell you, no, Allah is telling you these punishments as a means, it's not the goal. Okay? This was a means to reach to a goal. While traditionalist scholars are now stuck to saying, no, these are the actual, you have to implement, this is the goal also, this is the purpose also. Do you get me? So then it leads to a discussion which has led to a discussion, and this is where I say that they come to a main discussion, which I'm just dropping it for those who are interested in researching these topics of modernism versus traditionalism. The common question that are these laws which are mentioned in Islamic laws, are they even such that they can be implemented and can you run an Islamic government with that or not? Do you get me? Okay? Are they capable such that you can run an Islamic government with that or no? And the examples they give is, for example, look at what's happening today. The rule of the cutting of the hands is not being implemented in any of the Islamic countries, okay? The rules of zina are not being implemented in any of the Islamic countries. Look at the rules even to the further, go to the issue of diya also and blood money. Okay, so the common understanding is that a woman is half the price of the men. The men and women are not equal, yeah? So the men's price is, for example, 100 shillings. I'm just giving an example, okay? If it's 100 shillings, then the woman's price is 50, okay? But this is in theory. When it comes to practice now, they use the treasury to be able to compensate for that 50. So they consider the men and women equal when it comes to practicality. In theory, yes. So this is where the progressive scholars come in and say that, okay, are the rules in the Islamic laws even capable to run an Islamic government? Because every time you run to a secondary ruling, you hear this a lot, you run to a hukm thanawi. That means you cannot run the government with the primary rulings. You keep on running to secondary rulings. Okay? A proper example of that would be the code of conduct for Muslims in the West. So you notice every scholar writes code of conduct for Muslims in the West, as if the Western people have their own rules and the Eastern people have set of different rules. This shows you that there are secondary rules coming in. I hope you're getting me where I'm trying to get to, okay? This is a debate by itself. This is a discussion which needs to be had. It's a serious discussion which needs to be done to be able to save the generation to come, okay? The point I was trying to make was this. Tariqiyya or mawdu'iyya. So the riwayats of walking, should we look at it from tariqiyya perspective or mawdu'iyya? At the moment, majority of the scholars are looking at from mawdu'iyya perspective, okay? That's point number 2. Point number 3, I hope we accept this principle. The principle that the Holy Prophet is a role model for even the Imams also. Now, because we don't have examples of the Imams and the Holy Prophet going for Ziyarah, the examples now we are going to use is for Hajj now. So the Holy Prophet went for Hajj, the early Imams went for Hajj, and we have these examples. Okay? So we will then use this principle that the Prophet's seerah and the early Imam's seerah becomes a hujjah for the later Imams, as we will see as we go further. Okay? I hope this principle is accepted by a majority, at least, of the Muslims. Unless now somebody comes and is like a Malangi or a very extremist kind of understanding that, no, Hajj ko ziyarat ke saath, you can't keep these two. Ziyarat is ziyarat and Hajj is Hajj, okay? When you go see some of the riwayats about Karbala, you get surprised that how did these riwayats get into the books also? That Kaaba is being diminished, the Ziyarah is, the Hajj and the Kaaba is being diminished altogether. What happened, okay? So we have this. I'm not saying there are those kind of Malangis who say that, that Ziyarah of Karbala is better than whatever. But I'm sure majority of the Muslims do accept this principle that the Holy Prophet can be used as a principle and a criteria for judging should we walk or should we use a transport, okay? This is point number 3 and point number 4, which is a very important discussion, which I even had in the previous discussion. If walking is mustahab, the way it's being mentioned, that for every step you will get this much thawab and you'll get this much thawab and this much thawab, then the question which comes in is a very natural question which I asked even in the previous discussion. Why did the Imams themselves not walk then? If the riwayats are talking about walking, if they're understood literally that walking was to be the goal, then how come the Imams themselves didn't walk? For every walk they should have got one thawab. There was so much thawab in it. How come the Imams themselves didn't walk again? And if you come and tell me again they didn't get the time and the situation, again, these are excuses which we have discussed in the previous discussion, okay? So, one of the biggest indicators to understand that these riwayat should not be understood literally is this, that the Imams themselves didn't understand it like that. Okay? As we come to the riwayat, we will see that. Now, we start the discussion. I'm sorry, time today is, but we start the discussion, okay? So, discussion number 1. What I'm advocating for is that should these riwayats be studied literally and separately, or they should be studied holistically and collectively. What do I mean by that? When you look at the riwayats, you look at the hadith corpus, if you just search man masha, you will get different kinds of riwayats, okay? Walk to janaza, walk to help your brother, walk to go visit your brother, walk to masjid, walk to, I don't know, so many things. Now, the positive riwayats also, and that is why the likes of Sheikh Muhammad Sanad, for example, who is one of the mujtahids in Najaf today, he comes and makes a principle out of this. Mashyul ibadah. Okay? So walking for an ibadah is ibadah. Okay? He has a book where he has discussed this. He has a book on qawaid al-fiqhiyya. Buhuth, its name, Buhuth fil qawaid al-fiqhiyya. Okay? There's a portion of that which he discusses the whole issue of walking. He's established this principle that if you walk for an ibadah, then the walking itself is also ibadah. So my question now comes in, and this is where I'm asking that there's a need for research on this and re-evaluation of these ahadith, because we have positive riwayats which say that if you walk to help somebody, walk to masjid, walk to ziyarah, walk to hajj, but we also have hadith which say that the negative side. Now, should we understand those also literally? Okay, so for example, this hadith is quoted by Sheikh Saduq. Okay, man masha. It's a very long hadith. There's so many man mashas in this hadith. Okay, I've picked up a few. I didn't have time to collect all those. If somebody can pick it up, you can even understand collectively these ahadith. Man masha fi sulh bayna ithnain. So the one who walks to reconcile between the two, then the reward is mentioned. Now, the question I'm asking is here. من مشى في قطيعة بين اثنين. So the one who walks to break up between the two, to create a dispute between two brothers, then should we understand even these verses, these riwayats literally or no? Okay, so that is okay. Walking for ibadah is ibadah. Okay, so now walking for non-ibadah also becomes ibadah itself. Does it count as more punishment? So to make it clear, so if I'm walking, God forbid, to go and create disunity and dispute between two brothers, so if I walk, will I get more guna and more punishment than if I go in a car or if I go in a plane? So for example, if I have to walk 100 kilometers, it'll take 2-3 days to walk. If I go in a car, it'll take me an hour. If I go in a plane, it'll take me 10-15 minutes. So what now? The guna and the punishment will also depend on that, or no? The criteria is what you are going to do, and the goal is what you're going to do. That dispute and creating of dispute between two brothers. That's the purpose. This is just a means. Okay, the transport you use is just a means. If you walk, you use a plane, you use a train, you use a whatever, doesn't make a difference. Okay, scholars need to understand these riwayats collectively and come and tell us that I have not seen any scholar coming and saying that you will get more sin if you walk towards creating this harmony. Or for example, man mash'a fi aybi akhihi, the one who walks to create, to be able to find faults and flaws in somebody. So if somebody walks, then he gets more punishment. I have not seen this, okay? Unless somebody comes and shows me, yes, there is more punishment for walking towards doing guna, okay? So somebody walks towards doing a sin, he gets more punishment than if somebody goes with a car or somebody goes with another means of transport. I don't know, I've not seen that, okay? So and that is what I'm advocating for, that the riwayats need to be understood collectively so that we can come to a conclusion on those riwayats. For example, there's a whole chapter which Sheikh Kulaini has put in Kafi, Babu man masha ila ta'amin lam yud'a ilayh. Okay, so the whole chapter of walking towards an invitation for food where you are not invited. So if you are not invited somewhere and you walk towards it, this is a whole chapter by itself. Then the punishment is mentioned. So is walking the condition and the whole issue here, or no? The issue is you are going to a place where you are not invited. Do you get me? When you start understanding these riwayats literally, then we'll have a lot of issues in understanding these riwayats, okay? So this is discussion number one. What I'm calling for is these riwayats, all these of mashi and walking should be understood together, collectively, and then come up with a conclusive answer. Not look at it very separately and compartmentalize these riwayats and say, oh, these riwayats mean walking, but these riwayats, when they say walk, they don't mean walking here. How does that work? Okay, this is one first discussion. Second discussion now, again, this is where we get into the hadith now, okay? Look at the hadith. As we said, we don't have riwayats where Imams went for ziyarah. So we are now going to the Holy Prophet and the Imams' riwayah which they went for Hajj. And then you will use that as a principle in ziyarah. Okay? Because Hajj is wajib. If that is the method they used in Hajj, then in ziyarah it becomes even more. Okay? I hope you're understanding where I'm trying to go to. I'm just quoting you 6-7 riwayats from Kafi of Sheikh Kulaini. Otherwise, there are riwayats in Sheikh Tusi's Tahdib and Man La Yahduru al-Faqih of Sheikh Saduq. The riwayats are plenty. Okay? But look at the riwayats, you get the gist of those who are understanding these riwayats literally. Okay? First riwayah. Very interesting riwayah. Okay? The Rawi says, Ibn Bukair says, I came in the presence of the sixth Imam alayhi salam and says, we want to go to Mecca walking. Okay? So Imam then turns back to him and tells him, La tamshu, don't walk. Can you see the understanding of the Imams and what we are now? understanding. Okay? So now, look at the understanding of the Imams, okay? The Imam's understanding is like this. That, I'm sorry, there was a phone call. I was just, sorry for that, okay? So Imam tells him, La tamshu, don't walk, okay? Wakhruju rukbanan, go using a transport and a means of transport. So the Rawi then says, but we have got the information and we have got the message that the second Imam alayhi salam used to go for Hajj walking. So then Imam gives the reason. Okay? And those riwayats which say the second Imam went for Hajj, they have been explained. We have understood without those explanations. Okay? So notice the Imam says, يَحُجُّ مَاشِيًا وَتُسَاقُ مَعَهُ الْمَحَامِلْ وَالرِّحَالِ. Okay? The Imam used to go for Hajj walking. The reason for that is because his transportation means, so his animals were carrying luggage for him, mahamil, okay, they were carrying luggage and all for him, and that's why he used to walk. Okay, so from this hadith you get the understanding that the reason for walking is because the transportation means were full. Okay, they didn't have space, and that's why the Imam was walking. Reason number one given in hadith. Second hadith, again, this is Shaykh Kulaini. Again, as I said, I'm quoting all the riwayats from Kafi. Again, the Rawi says, I told the sixth Imam alayhi salam that we want to go for Hajj walking. What's your opinion? Tell us what's your understanding. So Imam turns back to him and tells him, and this is the principle Imam gives. Okay, strangely, the riwayats could be reconciled by this statement, that it's permissible, both is permissible, walk and use a transport. Okay, inna an-nasa la yahujjuna mushatan wa yarkabun. There's some who go walking and there's some who go using a transport. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, you can do both. So the Rawi was very smart. He turns back and says, I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you, ayyuhuma ahabbu ilayk. Tell me, what is more beloved to you? Should we ride or should we mount? Should we use a transport? Notice the answer of the Imam, opposite to what we are understanding today. Tarkabuna ahabbu ilayya. If you use a means of transport, it's better to me than you walking. So then Imam goes on further explaining why. He says, ذَلِكَ أَقْوَى لَكُمْ عَلَى الدُّعَاء وَالْعِبَادَةِ. Okay? It's because the reason is because you will have strength for doing dua and ibadah. The amount of walking you do, you will lose strength. Okay? This is exactly opposite of what's happening today. I remember a few years ago when I used to ask people, they used to go for arba'een. Again, as I said, I have no issues. Those who want to go, they can go walking. Yeah. But when I used to ask them that, okay, you walked, did you get time in the haram? Did you get time to talk to Allah? Did you get time to, do ibadah? And they were like, after 3 days, we were tired. One of them even tells me, I got blisters in my legs. I couldn't even go further to the haram even once. Okay? That's where it's going. The Imam is speaking the opposite altogether. Okay? Especially talk to people who go in the summer. If arba'een falls in the summer, you will notice people are focusing more on making themselves wet, and it's the heat altogether. Is it necessary to walk and miss out? According to the Imam, you're missing out on the ibadah and the dua. Okay, now even the stress is gone in that now, unfortunately, food here and I don't know, chai here and this and here. These are things happening, okay? Look at the understanding of the Imams. This is the second riwayah. The third riwayah, the Rawi comes and asks the Imam, Abi Basir asks the Imam that, is walking better or using a transport better? The Imam says, if a person wants to save money, is walking to save money, then better he should use a transport. Okay, so if you are riding, if you are walking because you want to save money, then don't. Better ride. Okay, this is the third riwayah. The fourth riwayah, this is an interesting riwayah, and you see the theme repeating now. The Rawi is asking the Imam, Ibn Bukayr is asking the Imam, that is walking better or using a transport better? Notice the answer of the Imam. And the next riwayah is the same answer also. He says, Bal rakiban, you should go in a transport, use a means of transport and go for Hajj. Why, Imam? He says, فَإِنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ حَجَّ رَاكِبًا. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did Hajj rakiban. Okay, he was using a mount and he was using the means of transport to go to Hajj. And this is where I come and say, is the seerah of the Prophet now hujjah for us or no? If the Prophet went to Hajj in a mount, are we not doing the opposite? I don't know. This is a question, I leave it on you. Okay. The next riwayah is very interesting. Okay, these are all, as I say, these are all in Kafi. The Rawi says, I asked the Imam about Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So this riwayah now explains what did it mean that Imam Hassan used to go for. Imam used to go for walk. Okay, what does walking mean? Does it mean that he used to walk from Medina to Mecca or no? It means inside Mecca itself for the rituals. Notice, I asked the Imam an Mashi al-Hasan alayhi salam min Mecca or min al-Madina. Okay, did he used to walk from Medina or did he used to walk inside Mecca? So Imam says no, min Mecca. He used to walk inside Mecca, and that's why the understanding scholars have, as I go further and quote it, that mustahab to walk inside Mecca. Okay, so Imam used to walk for the rituals and the manasik of Hajj on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, when he used to go to Arafah and Mina. Towards there he used to walk. Otherwise he used to come from Medina, he used to come on a mount. Okay, unless the mount was full with luggage. But otherwise he used to use his mount to come on his mount. When he used to come inside Mecca, when he used to go for the rituals of Hajj on the 8th and 9th of Dhul Hijjah, then he would walk. Okay, after finishing that also he will come back in a mount also, as we'll see in the riwayats also. Okay, so now the Rawi turns back and says that but I want to go for Hajj. What should I do? So as if he's still confused. He's being told, Baba, inside Mecca, he's still confused. He still wants to stick to the same walking. Okay? Some of us, like the way we want it to be walking. The Imam turns back and says, no, كان الحسن عليه السلام يزور راكبا. Okay? So this riwayah also shows you that Imam Hassan used to go rakiban. He used to use a transport to go to Hajj. Do you get me? Okay? So again he goes on further, he says, but وَسَأَلْتُهُ أَنِ الرُّكُوبِ أَفْضَلْ أَوِ الْمَشْيِ. Okay, what is better, walking or using a transport? So Imam tells him, الرُّكُوب, go with a transport. So he's still confused. You see, he's trying to get the answer that, walking is better. So he says, I asked the Imam, الرُّكُوب أَفْضَلْ مِنَ الْمَشْيِ. You really saying that climbing a mount and using a transport is better than walking? He says, Na'am. And why? The principle is being made now. لأن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله ركبا. Do you get me? The Holy Prophet used to do it like this. He used to use a mount and used to go to Hajj using a means of transport. So if the Prophet did it, then I leave the questions on you, okay? Now, this riwayah explains where did the Imam used to walk, okay? So the Rawi asks, when does walking end? So the Imam says, إِذَا رَمَى جَمَرَاتِ الْأَكْبَى وَحَلْقَ رَأْسَهُ فَقَدْ انْقَطَعَ مَشْيُهُ. Okay? Once you have done stoning and you have shaved your head, then again you resort back to mounting. So walking ends here and then you start going. So now you go for tawaf again to Kaaba. You will then go فَلْيَزُرْ رَاكِبًا. You will then mount again. So you want to go to Kaaba, you mount. You use a means of transport. Okay? I hope I'm explaining what I want to mean. Again, when you come to riwayats about even Ramyul Jamara and stoning, they're contradictory narrations. I'm not getting into those discussions also. Okay, this was discussion number 2. The riwayats which we have, notice they're contradictory to the level that they're enforcing more of using a mount rather than walking. Okay, which is opposite with what is happening today. Now, how do scholars explain this? So very quickly, the first explanation I would like to give from Ayatollah Khoui, rahmatullah alayh, in his Mawsu'a in volume 26, okay, page number 60. There's a discussion on Hajj, okay, as I say, these riwayats are on Hajj, okay. So he's discussing the whole issue of istita'a and mustati' and capability for Hajj. What's the condition of being somebody capable to go to Hajj? Okay, so there's difference of opinion within the scholars. Scholars differ. One opinion Ayatollah Khoui mentions is this, that if a person, okay, if he can walk, so he doesn't have a mount, he doesn't have a means of transport, but he can walk to Mecca and go for Hajj. Should he go for, this is the whole discussion, yeah? If a person can go for Hajj, okay, without difficulties, without hardships, he has the capability of walking to Hajj and going to Mecca. Should he walk or not? Is he a mustati' and is he considered in Sharia a capable person or no? This is where two different opinions come out. There's a group of scholars, Ayatollah Khoui mentions Sheikh Hurri Amuli of Wasa'il al-Shi'a. He says that if you have the strength of walking and if you're not going to face hardships, then it's wajib for you to walk towards Mecca. Okay? Why? Because you've become mustati, you have become capable. But the second opinion is my discussion. Okay? وَذَهَبَ الْقُدَمَاءُ وَجَمَاعَةٌ مِّنَ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ. The classical scholars and there's a group of contemporary scholars who have opined on this. They hold this opinion. And what is that? إنهما معتبران مطلقا حتى في حق من كان متمكنا من المشي. Okay? No, they say that there are two conditions which are required. One, you have to have a provisions, which is not our discussion. And two is the rahila, which is the mount and the means of transport. So if you don't have the means of transport, you're not mustati', even if you can walk to Mecca. Do you get me? Okay? Scholars are discussing to this level, that if you don't have the mount, then you are not mustati'. Now, even if you can walk to Mecca, still, you don't qualify to become a mustati'. Okay? Now, he goes on further by mentioning this. This is a very important statement to ponder upon. He says, فَلَوْ حَجَّ مَاشِيًا مِن دُونِ وُجُودِ الرَّاحِلَةِ لَا يَجْزِئُ حُجَّةً عن حُجَّةِ الإسلام or حَجَّةٍ عن حَجَّةِ الإسلام. Okay? If a person doesn't have a mount and he decides to walk and he says, I will go because I have the strength to walk towards Kaaba and Mecca, his Hajj is not counted to be Hajj. Why? Because he's not mustati'. He didn't have the rahila and he didn't have the mount and the means of transport. Do you get me where the scholars have gone to? Now, if this is the state of Hajj, okay, where you need a mount to be able to become mustati', to go towards Hajj, then what happens about those riwayats which tell you that you can walk from your home to go towards the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam? For Hajj, you are not becoming mustati', which is a wajib act. Now, ziyarah is going to be recommended. These are areas which require research, okay? And why is this happening? He goes further. He says, وَمَنْشَأُ الْإِخْتِلَافِ اخْتِلَافُ الرِّوَايَاتِ. This is a norm, yeah? This is very normal. That the reason for this conflict and this difference of opinion is because the riwayats are contradictory. Okay, so there are riwayats which say that you have to walk if you have the strength to walk. The other ones, it says وَعِدَّةٌ مِنْهَا تَدُلُّ عَلَى اعْتِبَارِ الرَّاحِلَ مُطْلَقًا. There's some riwayats which put the condition that you have to have the mount. Without the mount and the means of transport, you cannot go for Hajj. Okay, بل بعضها صريحة. Okay, some are very categorical. This is Ayatollah Khoui. This is one scholar. Allama Majlisi, very quickly, when he comes in now, he is now reconciling between those narrations which we saw in Kafi. Okay, some narrations say the Prophet walked, the Prophet went on a ride, the Imams walked and all whatnot. How do you reconcile? So now look at it. He says واختلف الأصحاب لاختلاف الأخبار في أن المشي أفضل أو الركوب. This statement should be enough to put us into research. Okay, the ulama and the scholars have differed is whether walking is better or using a means of transport is better. They've differed, and the reason for that is the riwayats, the differing riwayats. Now, do we need a further clue and an indicator than that? Okay, now he then goes on giving different reasonings. Okay, he says, "Wal-mashhur bayn al-ashab," the common opinion. Notice popular opinion. We have already discussed shuhra in some of the previous discussions. It's mashhur and popular between our scholars that you will differentiate between weakness and non-weakness. So if you walk and you become weak, then better not to walk. Okay, so that's one opinion. The second opinion he goes and gives is the whole reason of the person who walks because of saving. We saw that riwayah. He uses that riwayah. The third reasoning he gives, he says walking is better if it creates kasrun nafs. Okay, this is the point I'm trying to make also, and it's there in some of the riwayats of Ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So for some, walking creates humility, kasrun nafs. Okay, if it creates that state of humility, then walking becomes better. Okay, if it doesn't, walking and climbing on a transport it creates the same humility, then there's no difference. So look at the riwayah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam also. This is in Kamil al-Ziyarat. Okay, the riwayah is a bit long. I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying imshi hafiyan. Okay, wamshi bimashyi al-abd al-dhalil. So when you go for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the Imam says, take out your the sandals or the shoes or whatever. Now, is it literally you should take out? One of the signs of being humble is to be able to take out your shoes. But if that's not the sign of humility, then it's fine. Okay? So Imam says if you want to go for a ziyarah, okay, then go in a state of humility. Okay, so if humility is created, then beautiful, then you go in that state. Otherwise, walking is not recommended. That's another reason. Another reason which Allama Majlisi gives is he says that these riwayats, it's referring to the rituals of Mecca. Okay, so ويمكن أن يحمل أخبار المشي من مكة لأفعال الحج. Okay, so walking is for doing the rituals of Hajj, going to Arafah and the way we saw some of the riwayats. Now this is an interesting understanding which I don't agree with, because using the taqiyya issue every time and every place, I don't feel it's the right. We're misusing taqiyya, okay? But this is his understanding, Allama Majlisi's understanding. He says, وَيُحْتَمَ الْأَخْبَارُ فَضْلِ الْمَشِي عَلَى التَّقِيَّةِ. Notice, Allahu Akbar. We are doing the opposite today, okay? He says that it's possible that the reports and the narrations which praise walking were issued in the state of taqiyya. Now, I don't know, Sunnis were walking a lot at that time. That is why they wanted to do the opposite of walking. But that is the case. If it's the riwayats of walking are issued in a state of taqiyya, we are doing the opposite today. Okay? And the reasonings go on. One more reason from Mullah Faiz Kashani in his Al-Wafi, when he's explaining Al-Wafi, in his Wafi, he's explaining these riwayats. He says, أن المراد بالمشي مشي من Mecca. Okay, he's stressing that when you look at these riwayats, these riwayats don't indicate that you should be walking from one city to another. No, it's within the city of Mecca itself. Okay, so this whole issue of walking from Najaf to Karbala is not supported within the riwayats if we understand these riwayats literally. Okay, then he gives another reason, and this is my final reason, which or no, we have one more statement from one of the scholars. He says this, that it's possible that using a transport is better than walking because it will give you more time in the place of Hajj. Okay, that's where you can do more ibadah and more dua and all what. So there's some people who are walking, you will reach earlier than them, and that's how you can be able to benefit more from ibadah and more. Do you get me? Okay, so this is opposite to what again we are understanding. This is understood from the riwayah of Hisham bin Salim. This is in Tahdhib of Sheikh Tusi, okay, which I don't want to get into the riwayah. Finally, the statement I want to use is of Sheikh Muhammad Sanad. I quoted him earlier, and the reason I'm quoting him is because some of his statements are very hard for me to fathom, but I will keep it for you so that you can understand it. So he, as I said in his discussion, he has around a whole discussion on this topic. When he comes and lists down all the riwayats of using a transport, using a means of transport, then he comes and explains this. Okay, he comes and explains what does it mean. So notice, he says, وَلَعَلَّ وَجْهُ الرُّكُوبِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ. So the whole discussion is now, the Holy Prophet used a mount. Should we not be using a means of transport if he did it? So he says, no, still walking is more mustahab, even if the Prophet did it. Why? He explains. He says, لِأَجْلِ أَنْ لَا يَشُقَّ عَلَىٰ أُمَّتِهِ. The reason the Prophet did was he wasn't establishing a sunnah. Rather, he wanted his ummah not to undergo troubles and hardships, and that's why he did that. Otherwise, he was not in the state of establishing a sunnah. Okay, وإن كان ما فعله رسول الله ليس بداعي جعل السنة منه في ذلك. He was not in the state of establishing a sunnah of walking. Rather, this is the surprising part, which is I find it very hard to fathom. He says, بل من باب ترك المشي الراجح. Okay, the Holy Prophet left a more recommended act, an act which was more meritorious, and performed a less meritorious act. Why? So that the ummah should not undergo troubles. I don't know if it makes sense to you. Beautiful. Now, should we follow the Prophet and what he did, or should we follow these explanations now? I leave it upon you. Okay, and finally, if somebody comes up with the explanation and says, oh, we have riwayats which say that Imam Hassan alayhi salam walked from Medina to Mecca, my answer is this, that the riwayats are in two books. One of them is a later book, okay? So it's in Ibn Shahr Ashub's Manaqib, okay? He takes the riwayah from Hilyatul Awliya of Abu Nu'aym al-Isfahani, who is a Sunni scholar, okay? Now that's what I'm saying. At times when we want to justify, we start justifying using every hadith possible. No, it doesn't work like that, okay? So that hadith is a 5th century hadith. When we have earlier hadith in Kafi and earlier books, those are more reliable and those are more authentic. Number one. The second hadith is in Sheikh Mufid's Al-Irshad also. Now, you understand that when you have a historical narration in a historical book, and then you have ahadith which are plenty talking about it, and scholars have even understood it differently. As you saw that scholars say that Imam Hassan walked inside Mecca. He didn't walk from Medina to Mecca. That means they didn't accept this hadith of Sheikh Mufid in his Irshad. Okay, so these are the only two hadith I found walking from Medina to Mecca, and they're not in very reliable hadith books. Okay, so in conclusion, the whole issue of walking, again, as I said, I'm not against walking. I'm not against those who want to walk. It's their prerogative. They get, and it's them with their Allah, you know. The issue which needs to be done is we need to discuss this whole issue academically. Okay, and I raised some points that should we read these riwayats literally, or should we read them collectively? And then when we go and check the Sunnah and the seerah of the Holy Prophet and the Imams alayhimus salam, does it show us that they were preferring walking, or does it show us that they were preferring more of using a means of transport? And the reasons also they were given by the Imams themselves. Okay, so there's a need for further research on this whole topic. Let's pray to Allah to be able to give us the tawfiq, to be able to understand our religion better, and to understand in a way that the way Allah wants us to understand. And let's pray for the madhlumeen. Again, the oppressed are becoming more oppressed day and day. As I say that the Muslims are a cause of our own disunity, you know. We are seeing this throughout the ummah happening. Yeah, let's pray that Allah help all the madhlumeen, inshaAllah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.